The wind came in off the inlet sharp enough to sting through 2 layers of wool. Noa Halberg stepped down from the transport van and adjusted the strap of her helmet bag with one gloved hand. The tarmac was already alive, crews moving in practiced loops, tires hissing against the frost-dusted pavement, the low whine of auxiliary power units cutting through the air like a buzzsaw under ice. The light was flat, unforgiving, that dull Arctic gray that seemed to strip the world of dimension. She walked alone toward the parked F-15D, her boots scuffed, her flight suit plain and slightly outdated. There were no patches, no markings, just dark blue cloth and the quiet integrity of someone who did not ask to be seen. Her breath fogged briefly against the visor of her helmet before she tucked it under her arm. She approached the aircraft with the deliberate pace of someone who still honored the ritual. Noa didn't skip steps. She scanned the skin of the jet as she passed, eyes catching on details others would overlook. A loose fastener near the aileron housing, a thermal tape alignment, just a fraction off true, panel bolts torqued unevenly along the right intake strake. She didn't comment, didn't call it out, just noted it and moved on. Behind her, someone laughed, a young tech, no older than 22, holding a clipboard like a badge of belonging, squinted at her checklist. Didn't know the analytics team was doing joyrides now, he said, not even waiting for a response. The pilot beside him smirked, shook his head, and waved the tech back toward the crew station. At the base of the ladder, Major Kent Barlow stood adjusting his gloves, his face ruddy from the cold, visor up, posture relaxed in that way only someone completely sure of his place could manage. He spotted her and tapped his headset mic. "Tower, this is Valkyrie 2, he said casually. "Bringing ballast today. Better pack a thermos." A clipped voice confirmed his status. Noa waited. Her own name never came through the channel. There was no mention of her presence. No note of the second seat filled. She climbed the ladder with methodical care, one boot at a time, pausing only to glance back across the ice field where the morning drills were just beginning. No one looked her way. Inside the cockpit, the heat hadn't kicked in yet. She lowered herself into the rear seat, feeling the cold metal through the suit fabric at her knees. She moved with clarity, not hesitation, running the seat alignment manually, checking the ejection pins, adjusting rudder pedal spacing by feel alone. Her fingers were steady on the straps. The checklist was already folded inside her glove, the paper soft from handling. Major Barlow didn't turn around. He flipped a switch overhead and began a light check sequence without saying a word. On the ground, the final pre-flight continued without her. She heard call signs spoken crisply, one after the next, punctuated by confirmations from crew leads. Her name never left anyone's mouth. She adjusted the mic inside her helmet but didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The canopy lowered. Light vanished in a blink, replaced by the soft pressurization hiss and the distant hum of systems coming online. Outside, someone wheeled the ladder away. Noa secured her harness, checked cabin pressure, and reached across to run the backup oxygen test. The controls felt familiar, familiar enough to pretend she belonged here, familiar enough to remember when she did. No one asked her for input. No one included her in the maneuver brief. Her call sign wasn't on the mission card. But she ran the sequence anyway silently, completely because someone had to. As the engines spooled and the tarmac began to blur in heat, shimmer and wind wash, Noa Halberg sat still in the rear cockpit of the F-15D, eyes forward, hands resting on the restraints. She did not sigh. She did not shift. She simply watched the runway form ahead through the glass, and waited. As the F-15D rolled toward the runway, Noa Halberg adjusted her posture in the rear seat, noting a slight delay in the right brake release. It was nothing catastrophic, a half-second lag, just enough to drift the nose off-center under full weight. She said nothing. The nose wheel corrected. The vibration smoothed. Her gloves rested lightly on the edge of the console. The harness across her chest shifted with each subtle tilt of the airframe. Wind pressed against the canopy, its pulse almost rhythmic, Radio chatter clipped in from tower to ground, none of it addressed to her. Major Kent Barlow's voice was casual and confident up front, trading weather reads and clearance calls like a man who expected every reply. Noa focused on the friction through the fuselage. It reminded her of a different cockpit, 2 years earlier. Same platform, different role. That day, she stood in front of the whiteboard alone after the others had left. She wiped it clean in silence, erasing the contour diagram she had spent 3 days refining, a proposed trim shift vector for Arctic crosswinds. She had submitted it formally, included glide slope data, terrain shadowing variables, and every correction factor based on air density at negative 23 degrees Celsius. The review response came back stamped, "The current protocol is sufficient." The board had stayed blank for weeks. She submitted the memo. She was not thanked. She was not fired. She was just gone. Her assignment changed without a meeting. No one explained it. She arrived at the sim facility the following Monday to find her nameplate gone. She opened the flight schedule and saw herself listed under analysis support. No cockpit code. No call sign. She logged in anyway. Back in the present, the aircraft creaked gently under throttle hold. The final pre-flight tones played across the upper console. Noa checked the hydraulic pressure on the left engine feed. It was high within tolerance, but high. She made a mental note. The checklist in her glove was folded along the same lines she had kept for 6 years. She had flown Arctic descents in real time before, solo, in clearance drills, when no one needed the sim bay. She requested the hours no one wanted. She logged the most night recoveries in the unit unrecorded, unacknowledged. The logbook that held her flight data had been reassigned. Her name scratched off in pencil. A note beside it, "Hold pending transfer." The transfer never came. She kept flying anyway. One woman, Anna Ricks, had warned her quietly in the break room. "Don't submit that report, Noa. They'll close the door without telling you, and they won't open it again." Noa submitted it anyway, because the math didn't lie. She remembered the first time she traced the downflow pattern off the western ridge. The wind tunnel printout was so thin she had to tape it to the sim screen to stop it from curling. She stayed 4 hours after close, running descent after descent, shifting bank angles by 5 degrees each time until the algorithm stabilized. She wrote the numbers down by hand, still has them, laminated, folded, in her chest pocket now. She once sat in the sim with the audio muted. No flight director, no command voice, just her hand on the stick and the hum of the fans and the white glow of digital snow out the canopy. That was when she knew she could land it, if the systems ever failed. She folded her hands now, resting them in her lap. The heat had reached the rear compartment. The wind was still howling outside, but inside it was quiet. She could hear her own breath through the comm loop. Kent Barlow didn't check in, didn't glance back. She looked through the canopy at the Arctic horizon. It was gray and flat and perfect. Noa Halberg did not want them to remember her. She wanted the aircraft to remember her hands. Valkyrie 2, entering descent curve, pitch preset locked, holding at 100.0. Major Kent Barlow's voice crackled in the headset, steady and self-assured. The F-15D leveled just above 12,000 feet, skimming the upper edge of a layered Arctic crosswind. The horizon to the west broke wide over a frozen inlet, flat silver under the morning light. The jet's frame was already humming cold, rigid, and under stress. In the rear seat, Noa Halberg adjusted the side stick position with the subtle precision of someone feeling the pressure through her legs, rather than watching the dial. Her left boot angled half an inch into the rudder pedal well. She kept her hands still, eyes tracking every tick of trim data as the nose began to tilt into the maneuver. Barlow pushed the throttle early, not wildly but enough. Enough to force the pitch roll ahead of curve alignment, enough to shave a few seconds off the arc. He didn't say a word to her. Wind slammed the fuselage at 28 degrees cross vector. The left wing dipped, caught, recovered. The right wing flexed, but not with the same give. Noa felt the vibration change. She glanced at the warning cue. Structural feedback spike. Lateral stress peaking above limit for less than half a second, enough to trigger yellow. Then the aileron let go. It wasn't a pop. It was a wrench. A single, body-wrenching torque. The right wing jerked upward and the nose yawed hard right. The entire jet flipped sideways into roll. Barlow groaned in the front seat. The HUD flashed instability. Trim loss. Lateral angle failed to lock. Then the comms cut short just the edge of his breath and then silence. Valkyrie 2, status tower crackled through, half garbled by weather drag. Noa gripped the stick. Her eyes ran the panel in sequence. HUD pitch blinking. Throttle input uneven. Right side overfed. No balance vector left. She reached up, flipped to rear seat manual. She did not speak. The cockpit twisted around her. The jet began to spin in slow motion. Wind screamed past the canopy. Below them, the inlet widened like a mirror of silence, flat, frozen, indifferent. Rear control engaged, she said, calm, attempting manual stabilization. Confirm pilot incapacitated, the tower asked, voice rising. She didn't answer. Left hand throttled back engine 2 to idle. Right hand increased engine 1 output to 72%. The yaw corrected by 12 degrees. Still spinning. The torn aileron had left drag on the right wing, creating asymmetric lift. The plane wanted to fall right, roll, and dive. She feathered pitch back with gentle trim. One click, another. 3 microseconds between them. Rudder pedal under her left foot responded, not enough. She pushed again. The jet groaned in response, a long metallic complaint that vibrated through her spine. She glanced at the oxygen gauge. Barlow's readout was low. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But not flying. The inlet was closer now. 2,000 feet. Stabilization in process. She said into the comm. Do not initiate recovery response. Telemetry is showing spin. Do you have the aircraft? Her gloved hand adjusted thrust again. Left engine down slightly to soften the drag pull. Right engine up just enough to balance without worsening torque. She watched the yaw rate drop. 7 degrees, 5, 2, 1. Then flat. The jet held. It wasn't pretty. They were tilted, lopsided, crabbing into the wind like a bird flying sideways through storm gusts. But they were no longer spinning. Rear control has the jet, she said. No emotion in the voice. Her left hand rested on the trim dial, right on the stick. The warning light she had flagged during pre-flight inspection was now steady red. She had known it meant something. She had not been asked. Noa breathed through her mask, even unshaken. The Arctic below was an endless field of frozen silence. She didn't smile. She adjusted by 2 degrees, held pitch, and waited for the next correction. They weren't down yet, but they weren't falling anymore. She was flying, alone, and the jet knew it. The control stick twitched under Noa Halberg's hand, just once, enough to confirm it was still hers. Altitude read 9,000. Glide path misaligned. Wind velocity climbed to 33 knots across the lateral vector. Right side drag was uneven, and the aileron response flatlined. She could feel the torque shift trying to pull them back into yaw. Her left foot pressed into the rudder pedal with constant counterforce. Her right hand barely moved, making micro-adjustments. More intuition than reaction. The aircraft groaned again. Not a stall sound, a fatigue sound. One long breath of metal reminding her that too many systems were doing too much work. She blinked slowly behind the visor, tracking the angle off the nose. The HUD flickered and faded to static. She didn't need it. Below, the inlet narrowed. Black ridges framed either side of a frozen corridor she had mapped by hand over 2 winters in simulation. It was never cleared for approach. No digital chart backed it. But she had studied the wind breaks and ice rise patterns, drawing them with grease pencil on a sheet taped to her bunk ceiling. The paper was folded in her thigh pocket now, soft from handling. The front cockpit was still. Barlow didn't move. His oxygen readout was low but stable, unconscious, not gone. She could hear faint rasping from his mic channel, a broken pattern of air and muscle. She clicked her own mic closed. Ground control could shout all they wanted. They weren't in the seat. They couldn't feel the tail drift or the way the right engine now threatened to vibrate above tolerance under torque imbalance. Throttle back on the right. Left engine steady at 70. Pitch nose down by 1 degree. Let gravity help. Let the wind carry. She was not flying anymore. She was guiding, shaping, letting the jet fall just enough to make it look like flying. The ridge loomed larger now. Too large. She banked left with the smallest wrist turn, trusting what the instruments no longer offered. She glanced at the terrain through the canopy. There. A silver track between snowcaps, just wide enough to bleed altitude before the final drop. Flaps held neutral. No hydraulic error. Gear bay temperature was cold enough to freeze the release. She toggled the cycle once, then again. No movement. The warning light blinked amber. Noa adjusted trim, slowed descent by throttle, flipped the manual gear override switch. The gear locked with a metallic bang. 5,000 feet. Nose high. Jet unstable but responsive. She shifted rudder pressure again, adjusting for the counter-yaw drift, feeling every inch of it through the soles of her boots and the pressure across her hips. The right side was still pulling. Not just drag mass imbalance from the torn control surface. She compensated with asymmetric engine push, adding just enough lift on the left wing to level their angle. 3,000 feet. The glacial ridgeline split wide to her right. The snow shifted in light gusts, swirling into curls of white mist. If she'd miscalculated, that swirl meant wind, sheer off the ridge face. Turbulence. But not enough to break them. She read the shadows, felt the rhythm of light and terrain. She knew the plateau, had dreamed it more nights than she could count, running descents from angles no one cared to test. This was not improvisation. This was recall. She toggled the checklist taped above the console, her own tape, her own list, not flight approved, not regulation, rejected in review, but followed now with absolute precision. 2,000 feet. She could see the landing zone ahead, a stretch of old tarmac along the reserve training field. Never used. Kept cleared for cargo drills. It was short and cold and half frozen. Noa reduced throttle. Bled speed without stall. Nose stayed stable. Frame still groaning. Final approach. Wind angle read unpredictable. She ignored the display. She could feel the ice lift forming under the belly. Ground effect was cutting in, pressing the aircraft down even before touchdown. She had one shot to flare and settle. 1,000 feet. She reached to the trim again. Left engine idle. Right engine ticking high just to keep their yaw from curling them into spin. 500. She pulled the stick gently. Rudder input steady. Flaps locked. Gear down. Altimeter read 8 meters. Breath steady. No voice. No commentary. She flared. The aircraft resisted. The right wing dipped hard from the imbalance. She kicked left rudder and fed the flare harder. Nose pitched. Wind shear screamed across the canopy. Her jaw tightened. The wheels hit. First bounce. Hard. Left wheel took it first, then both rear. The nose dropped, bit into the tarmac. Noa held the stick firm. Let the reverse thrust spool without override. Brakes clicked in with delay. The metal bucked once hard. Sparks trailed behind them. Smoke, but no fire. The jet skidded 40 meters, screaming across the surface like a machine trying to shake loose of its own skin. Then it stopped. Not neatly, not centered, but whole. She sat back against the harness, eyes still on the horizon. Barlow groaned again, faint and slow. Outside, emergency crews had started moving. Inside, Noa reached to the trim and dialed it back to neutral. Then she rested her hands on her lap and said, calmly, "Rear control. Aircraft down. Request medical for front seat." She didn't exhale. Not yet. The F-15D hissed to a halt against the cracked frost of the far tarmac. Steam curled up from the brakes, caught in the yellow cone of rotating floodlights. Emergency crews moved in with precision but no urgency. There was no fire, no explosion, just the ghost of impact hanging in the air, like heat that never arrived. Inside the cockpit, Noa Halberg reached for her release straps. Her gloves creaked at the knuckles. Her chest rose once beneath the harness, then settled. She powered down the auxiliary feed, toggled manual cutoffs, and keyed the canopy release. The jet hissed again. The sky above was gunmetal gray, layered with low clouds pressed flat by Arctic wind. She climbed out without waiting. Her boots struck the ice-slick tarmac with a quiet thud. No stumbling, no pause. She stepped down and moved aside as two medics rushed past toward the forward seat. Major Kent Barlow remained unconscious, his oxygen line still fitted, eyes closed. They lifted him gently. Noa didn't follow. Behind her, the hangar doors stood open, flooded with light. Ground crews had gone still. No one moved toward her at first. The only sound was the hum of a cooling engine and the distant clack of a tool cart being locked down. Her helmet was still in her hand. She set it gently on the wing. A tech approached from the left, no rank on his sleeve, his face open and pale from the cold. He didn't speak, just held out a plastic bottle of water, condensation frozen along one side. She took it, nodded once. His hands trembled slightly. From the control tower, two officers descended the steps without urgency. One was a senior controller. The other was a pilot, one of the younger ones who had laughed during the briefing last week. Neither said a word. They watched her walk past. Inside the tower, someone replayed the flight telemetry in real time. No overlays, no enhanced display, just raw path lines against terrain. A red vector showed the descent curve. Another line marked what the computer model said was possible. The two did not match. "This path," the controller whispered, "it shouldn't be survivable." In a file room upstairs, someone unfolded an old flight memo from 6 months prior. It was creased from storage, coffee-stained, and unsigned on the final line. The top read, "Alternate Descent Path Protocol, Arctic Crosswind Recovery." Below it was a diagram nearly identical to the one Noa had flown by instinct. Back on the tarmac, Noa reached the edge of the line where observers usually stand for launch prep. She paused there. Her breath fogged once, thin and slow. The younger pilot, James Tarrow, the one who had joked about ballast, stood watching her from 15 feet away. His mouth opened slightly. He said nothing. The water in her hand was cold against her glove. From behind, a clipboard appeared. A laminated card clipped to it her old checklist, one she had taped above the rear console without permission. It had been pulled after takeoff. Someone had found it again. It was handed back to her wordlessly. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She took the card, folded it once along the crease where it had always bent, and slipped it into her flight suit. They saw her, all of them, and no one needed to say it. The hangar was quieter than usual, not empty, not still, just quiet in a way that suggested something had happened and no one knew how to name it. Light fell in uneven shafts from the upper windows. A turbine cycled twice and cut. Somewhere across the bay, a socket tool dropped, with a single metallic note that echoed for a long time before being picked up again. Noa Halberg stood near the diagnostics rack by the west wall, flipping through the last maintenance log entry on a clipboard. Her gloves were tucked into her belt loop. She had brushed the dust from the console earlier out of habit, even though it didn't need it. A few techs moved through, carrying cables or checking crates. One of them glanced toward her. Another kept walking but adjusted their path slightly to avoid passing too close. She didn't look up. Her bag was open at her feet. Inside it was a folded paper map, her approach draft, the one drawn by hand and never formally archived. The corner was curled, the ink slightly smudged from a coffee ring months old. She had never thrown it away, just kept folding it flatter. A pair of boots stopped 5 feet away. She recognized the pattern of the steps before she turned. Colonel Elias Reddick stood there, jacket zipped, cap low, no salute, no file in his hand, just a clear folder, held carefully between his fingers. He didn't say her name. He held out the folder. Inside was the same diagram. Only now, it was laminated, clean, crisp, and sealed behind plastic. She didn't reach for it at first. Then she did. Took it with one hand. Her shoulder shifted slightly as she slid it under her arm. No smile. Just a nod that meant nothing. And everything. Colonel Reddick gave a single, brief look, one that carried apology, and something else behind it. Then he left. Noa turned back to the console. She tapped the screen twice, logged the gear bay temperature, and closed the file. The paper didn't go back into her bag this time. She set it on the rack beside her logbook. No one told her to put it away. The lights in the tech review office stayed fluorescent through the night. Monitors hummed. The chair at the second terminal was pulled slightly off-center, where Lieutenant Mason Durrell had left it during the shift change. He sat now with his sleeves rolled up, running diagnostics on the recovered flight data. The raw stream scrolled across the screen: altitude, thrust curve, rudder input, lateral correction rate. He had seen plenty of flight saves before, but not like this. At first, it looked like a lucky break. Then he checked the trim log. Manual override. Pitch input not just steady, but patterned. Too precise for panic. He pulled up the aircraft's fault diagnostics. Aileron failure at 7,000 feet. Flaps non-responsive until final approach. Manual gear deployment. Perfect flare timing. He leaned forward and typed a query into the archive terminal. Noa Halberg. Flight records inactive. Analysis team. He hesitated, then scrolled deeper. The first folder was labeled Cold Descent Trials. No one had ever cited it. Hundreds of simulator logs appeared. Time-stamped late nights, weekends. Each one ended with full descent captures, Arctic vectors, crosswind scenarios. He opened the 10th file, then the 15th. All of them showed similar correction patterns to the one flown that morning. A second folder surfaced, Alternate Descent Arctic Test Zone 3, unapproved. Review status marked rejected. Reason insufficient chain of approval. Inside was a scanned page, a hand-drawn diagram with glide slope angles and torque compensation notes. It matched the recovery path almost exactly. He leaned back in the chair. One more entry blinked. A voice file. Timestamp 2 years earlier. He clicked play. If this maneuver ever fails, her voice said, reduce thrust on the right engine to 70. Let the yaw pull, then balance it. Use pitch trim in slow intervals. Do not chase the bank angle. Let it settle. She'll fight you. That means you're flying. The playback ended. The room was quiet again. On the screen, the cursor blinked beside the words memo status unopened. Lieutenant Durrell looked at his reflection in the monitor. She had written it all down, flown it all, filed it all. And they never looked. Light stretched long across the hangar floor, soft and angled from the east. It caught the edge of the grounded F-15's intake, turned the frost along the canopy to glass. Noa Halberg sat just inside the sim room entrance, sleeves rolled, a weathered manual open across her lap. One pen rested behind her ear. Her gloves hung by the fingertips from the edge of her knee. Outside, the buzz of operations had resumed. The flight line sounded normal again. Lift prep, crew calls, refuel rotations. But something had shifted. Footsteps approached. She didn't look up. A young pilot stood beside her, holding a folded sheet of paper. He didn't speak right away, just waited, then handed it over. Roster update, he said quietly. You're listed for the 08 brief. She took it, scanned the line, and found her name. Printed this time. No pen, no scratch through. Just there. She nodded. That was all. The pilot hesitated, then turned and left. Noa reached into her bag and pulled out a checklist the same format as before, but freshly printed. Her initials were in the corner, bold and black. She peeled a strip of tape from her logbook, fixed the checklist to the side of the console, then stood. A new helmet sat on the shelf near the door. This one had her call sign on the side. She didn't reach for it yet. Instead, she walked past it, out through the threshold, into the light. No one followed, and she didn't look back. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones no one sees coming. Noa Halberg did not demand attention. She was overlooked, reassigned, and quietly erased. But she never stopped preparing. When the moment came, she met it not with noise, but with precision, grace, and strength built in silence. Her flight was not about proving others wrong. It was about staying ready, even when no one was watching. This is a story about the power of quiet conviction, about mastery earned in the margins, about knowing your worth, even when others forget it. If Noah's journey moved you, take a moment to reflect. Who around you flies under the radar? Who prepares without applause? Share your thoughts in the comments, and follow for more stories that honor quiet strength, resilience, and the kind of courage that never asks for permission.